All right, welcome everybody to the weekly Backdrop meeting status call. It is March 12th, 2015, and we get together every week to talk about the current state of Backdrop. We have an agenda document that we go through every week to kind of give us a status update on the overall project, as well as all the peripherals around the project itself. So we always start off with updates from the Project Management Committee, which right now that consists of Jen Lampton and myself. Just general project-wide issues or things that have been escalated for conflict resolution. And the one item we have from last week is that we still have 3 PHP Storm licenses. There was some confusion around who could actually acquire a license under the Backdrop CMS name. Right now, it is explicitly for the Backdrop Contrib group. So if you're a member of the Backdrop Contrib group, then you can get access to a free license to PHP Storm. So if you've joined the group and you would like a license, then you can email us info@backdropcms.org, and we can give you access to one of those licenses. We've also been making some progress around the Backdrop CMS trademark. We put in an application like 6 months ago to register Backdrop CMS as a trademark, and we've just now gotten to an actual human who is helping us go through the process of finalizing that trademark. So that's actually going really pretty well. We've got a phone call with the reviewer right after this, actually. So we'll let you guys know how that is progressing, just to establish Backdrop CMS as its own brand. Community growth. We've had a couple of new Contrib authors and an additional 7 new Backdrop Contrib projects filed since last week, which is fantastic to see that continuing to grow. And in the news, Lullabot wrote up its first article on Backdrop CMS, which was fantastic. Juan Oliveira, or that's not correct. Well, Juan wrote up this amazing article on lullabot.com, just a first impression of porting modules to Backdrop CMS, which was a really great introduction. Jen, I see you made it onto the call. Would you like to pick up on the agenda? We're currently on things that are not Backdrop itself.
Sure. Yeah, I had to change to a different Google account. Unfortunately, I've got plenty of those, so everything's fine. Google Plus. Yeah, so things we're working on that aren't Backdrop itself. The top of the list here is Drush. We have not really made any progress since last week on Drush because everyone seems to be pretty busy, but I think it's really, really close to having a working version. And not only is it close to having a working version, there's some instructions on how you can hack it together to make it work, and we also have a course of action for how we're going to make it work without having to hack it in the future, which I think all sounds really good. We've gotten a bunch of great work from people who are using it on their own products, and we also have had support from one of the current maintainers. So I think Drush progress is coming along well, which is good. We should be able to start using it pretty soon. So I'll try and give that another poke this week and see if we can get it closer to reality. But I'm really excited about having Drush for Backdrop. We're also working on having the update status module work for Backdrop CMS. It currently is enabled in all core versions, but we need to have a server app that will check the core version and any contrib modules you may have to check the versions of those and report back on the status of any site. And we hadn't been making any progress on that for a while because we were blocked by the launch of backdropcms.org on Backdrop, which is now done. It's live. We announced that last week. So if you haven't seen that yet, go ahead and take a look at backdropcms.org. It's now running Backdrop. And it has a fancy new module that will help us with the packaging of contrib projects on GitHub in a way that will allow us to add version strings that will, of course, tie in with our update status. So now if you are able to download a packaged version of a contrib module, it'll have a status version in it, which we can report back to backdropcms.org, check the version, and tell you whether you're up to date or not, which I think is super handy. Next step in that process is to create kind of a project database on backdropcms.org so we can track what the current version of each project should be. And Nate, I know you've been doing a ton of work on that lately. Do you want to give us an update?
Yeah, we've made a bunch of progress here, actually. So we launched, gosh, you know, I don't think we've mentioned it because we did this since our last meeting. We launched backdropcms.org on Backdrop itself.
We didn't announce last week?
I think we just did it this weekend, didn't we?
I thought we did it last weekend.
Well, anyway, backdropcms.org is now running on Backdrop itself, in case we didn't mention that last week, which is fantastic. And it unblocked a bunch of stuff, including getting us up and running with backdropcms.org starting to become the central repository for project listings. We already had a module written before the launch that would help do the package management. I'm going to meet Jen real quick. That would do the package management for Backdrop contrib projects. So we've actually already turned that on, but it looks like it's got some issues. We had the transliteration project, for example, come in yesterday. And what should happen is when you create a project on backdropcms.org, once you tag it for a release, the release will send out a webhook to backdropcms.org, which will then kick off the packaging script. And then the packaging script will add the version information into a package and then upload that package back to GitHub so that your version information will be contained within it. And that version information then is already actually being sent to backdropcms.org on cron jobs and every time update status runs. But backdropcms.org isn't currently capable of telling you whether or not updates are available yet or not. So we're making progress. Once we fix the packager, that means that sites will actually be able to tell backdropcms.org what versions of modules they're actually running, which is step one. And then step two, we need to work on backdropcms.org actually taking those versions and telling sites whether or not there are updates available. So to further that along, we've started a port of project module for Backdrop, which is basically like project module for Drupal itself. Project module kind of runs most of the infrastructure of Drupal.org. But for what we need on backdropcms.org, it's a lot narrower in scope. We don't need an issue tracker. We don't need integration with a version control system. But instead, we need integration with remotely hosted repositories. So that means integrating with GitHub to respond to these webhooks. When a new repository is made, we will create a new release node on backdropcms.org. So it's very similar to the way things work on Drupal.org, only it's going to be reversed. Instead of creating a tag and then requiring a node to be made for a release to exist on backdropcms.org, it'll be flipped around. And when you create a new release on GitHub, the release notes are on GitHub, and the creation of those release notes and the official release will in turn automatically create a release node on backdropcms.org. And then that will be used for all update status notifications in the future. So it'll be pretty similar to Drupal.org, only there'll be less manual interaction because most of the developer action happens on GitHub, and then things will automatically respond on backdropcms.org. So we're making a lot of progress on that front. Let's see, there are a couple of issues you can use to track that in the backdropcms.org issue queue. There's issue 22 is where most of that is being tracked. So that's, yeah, it's coming along. That's all we've got on update status. Jen, you're still muted. Can you take it back on?
Did you say that was issue 22?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm putting that into the Google Doc.
Oh, it's already there. It's right there at the top of the page.
Oh, okay. All right. So a much lower priority item, but also related to that, our packaging script will handle what happens if anyone creates a project in the contrib group. That's kind of one of the bonuses of being part of contrib, is you get your project packaged, you get security review, you get a bunch of other good stuff. But we do have use cases where people will not be able to put their code or not want to put their code into that group. And for those people, they'll need to manage their own version strings. So you can either, get a copy of the packaging script and manage that yourself, or just manually code in your version strings and hope that you remember to update them when you create new releases of your modules. But there are people who may want to create the equivalent of sandbox projects, which is what we have on Drupal.org, where you can kind of put your code up somewhere, but in a kind of alpha state where you're like, I'm not sure if this is ever going to go anywhere. You don't want to make an official project. Maybe you don't want to have an official release. And in order to meet that use case, we're hoping to implement a GitHub service so that you can create a project on GitHub, check a box, and say this is a Backdrop project. And Backdrop will be notified of the fact that that project exists and will allow people to find it via search or other means. But it won't be an official project in the same sense as the Sandbox project on Drupal.org is an official project. But since we don't have a lot of people who are scratching for that right now, that's a lower priority item, and it requires some more complicated integration with GitHub in languages we're not particularly familiar with. So it's been kind of de-escalated in priority now that we have this contrib group and we can deliver all of the functionality that we'd like to deliver to people in the contrib group. We'll deal with that first, and then we'll probably also start worrying about people who have big contributed projects that they don't want in that group that they do want official releases for. That's also a higher priority than the sandbox projects. But we do have a plan for sandbox projects eventually when we get down to it. And then we also have our API website is another thing that we're working on. I think for the most part it is stable, happy, chugging along. It's got documentation on it. It's got the actual API function definition stuff on it, but it doesn't have the same look and feel as the current Backdrop site. I think we have like one final change to make to backdropcms.org to get our current theme done, and then we're just going to rip that theme off the current site, or actually leave it on, but copy the theme off the current site and throw it on the API site and throw that up for a review and see what the API site looks like with the correct fonts and stuff on it, because it works and looks so good right now. We don't want to impact the usability at all just by changing the theme. So we're going to kind of throw that up for a design review and see what it's like in the new theme. And we may need to do a little redesigning based on the idea that the site has a different purpose, and we want to make sure that we're still able to serve that purpose. So Nate was asking if I sound like a robot to anyone else. I have a different microphone I can switch to if it sounds too funnily. Okay, so maybe it's just Nate that makes me sound like a robot. Okay, sorry guys. Sorry Nate, everyone else is fine. Okay, so that's the API site. All it really needs is a new theme, and we will get to that soonish. And then our primary website, backdropcms.org, obviously, I guess we did it last week, but after the meeting last week. Anyway, it's on Backdrop CMS, which is really exciting. Woohoo! Sorry I didn't make more fanfare about that earlier. But obviously, next steps are in designing and building the module theme layout system over there. So obviously we've got this integration with GitHub going on, which I think is super important, but we also need to build kind of the front end user facing side of it. Like, I want to go to backdropcms.org and search for a particular module or look at available themes. And Drupal.org doesn't do a particularly good job of solving those problems, so we're also looking to other sources of inspiration, like how WordPress solved this problem, and trying to figure out the best way to represent these things to our users. And so we're going through kind of a whole second round of design process for those specific needs, and then we're going to try and build those out as well. So while we're building the technical stuff on the back end, we're also trying to redesign and think about the problem space from the front end as well. So that's what's on our plate currently for the new backdropcms.org site. In addition to rethinking how mobile navigation works, we have some designs on doing mobile navigation for that site. We just haven't implemented it yet. And I used to say the excuse was that we didn't want to do it twice because we only want to do it on Backdrop, but now the site's on Backdrop, so we can implement that whenever we want. And that might be a nice task that we could kind of dole out to anyone who's like, oh, I know responsive whatever, I can do that. Or be like, perfect, we have this task that needs to be done. If you want to make our flagship site have nice fancy mobile navigation, we have designs we can send over, post somewhere, and that would be a really appreciated thing. Yay, Wes! Okay, so yeah, it would be good to get that going too. And then long term, we have other plans for the flagship site too that are not such high priority. We want people who are building sites on Backdrop, now that we have sites on Backdrop, to be able to post them in a kind of a showcase, just like Drupal has a showcase. I think that would be super handy. And then we also want to be able to post things like service providers. We have a lot of people who've uploaded their logos as supporters of Backdrop. We might want to be able to allow them to categorize themselves and advertise their services as development companies or hosting companies or any of that stuff, so people can find providers for things they need. And longer term, once we have people providing services, those people are going to be needing to hire people, so we'll put up a jobs section based, of course, on the wonderful job Drupal has done on their job section too. So we will eventually get to all these things. Short term, our priority is obviously on allowing people to get modules, themes, and layouts from our site. But we do have plans to integrate everything else, and we will do it as time allows. All right, so back to Backdrop itself. We have a patch release coming. Did we do one last week, Nate?
No, we were on the schedule for doing it this week at the latest, so probably today, actually.
Okay, so we will do a patch release today, probably, or tomorrow, if not today, that fix some pretty serious problems with the CMI import-export when you had theme settings not working, and some other issues with CMI. And then there's a handful of other little tiny bug fixes in there too that'll get fixed. And then our next minor release will be on May 15th. And we have a bunch of things scheduled for that release, which are currently making me nervous. So 1.1 coming out on May 15th, which, by the way, will be at DrupalCon Los Angeles, which we didn't intend that to happen. We made the schedule based on the calendar, and then we realized we'll be there. But what we thought might be kind of fun is if we did a celebratory dinner that night. Some people have been talking about doing a get-together at DrupalCon LA for Backdrop anyway, but we didn't want to do it at DrupalCon, so we thought, let's just take everyone to dinner some night and buy drinks. Doug Van generously offered to help sponsor that event, so probably be a beer on Doug, a smaller event to start off. Which is great. And I think if we did that the night of releasing 1.1, we could have a little celebration, yay, 1.1's out, and everyone would be really excited. So Nate and I will probably be holed up in some sprint room somewhere, or maybe the hotel room, trying to get 1.1 out. But then after that, we'll all go out and have drinks and celebrate, because we'll be surrounded by other friendly people. So I think that'll be really fun. So for 1.1, we have 4 things on the agenda. The built-in rich text editor is high on the list and also high on the likelihood of not being done in time. It's obviously a very important feature, but we've got people who are porting other WYSIWYG modules, sadly, instead of working on helping us get WYSIWYG in core, because porting is much easier. Getting WYSIWYG in core is really hard, which is understandable, but we haven't been making a lot of progress on that. There's also kind of a lot of hand-waving as to how it should work, and we need someone to kind of architect very specifically which pieces go where. And that, I think, it takes a much longer amount of time and more focus to try and figure out how it should work, and then kind of re-engineer things as they go into core, which is hard to get people to do in their spare time. It's just there's not that much focus available. So I think, if we have anyone who wants to come in tomorrow and start working on it, it could get done. But it's definitely not moving as fast as we would like. Other stuff, though, that's going in core are token module and path auto module. These are 2 of the top 10 modules on Drupal.org. I started last week making a bunch of progress moving token into core, and I came across a couple of stumbling blocks, but it wasn't nearly as tricky as I was expecting it to be. So we'll see if it continues to go that smoothly. But I think there's hope for at least getting that done, which is good, and then hopefully Path Auto will follow. Path Auto is going to be a little bit more complicated because we have to rethink where the user interfaces for stuff goes, whereas with Token, The only real interface just attached anywhere. It didn't have a, like an admin page that needed to be moved someplace different. So I think that token part was going pretty well. Path Auto should follow. I think there's an issue open for each of them. Token is 480, and Path Auto is 87. And if anyone wants to follow those, there's going to be a lot of posted stuff like, I think we're going to put it here. What do you think? And we're going to need some feedback on that. So those issues will get tech needs feedback. So if you want to watch that queue, that would be really helpful. And then the other thing that we're working on that I am super excited about, and it is proceeding at rapid pace, is getting our new branded admin look and feel in. So some of the feedback we've been getting for people who've tried Backdrop so far is they're like, wow, it looks exactly like Drupal. Now I kind of like to change that first impression so people will install it and be like, oh, it looks a little different. It doesn't have to be super different. And we have all these great designs from Darius with different ideas on how we can make a big impact by changing a little here and a little there. And we have all of that. Wes is divided up to a whole bunch of subtasks, which is really great. We're trying to get all of the design finalized while cranking out things that are finalized. And we've got pull requests against Backdrop that include these changes, and I think it's going really well. So I'm really excited to see those changes make their way into core. I don't know if any of those have been committed. Nate, are you kind of waiting until we get a critical mass of them to merge them all in so that it won't be like the only thing different is the tabs? Or what's the process for getting those in?
Yeah, they're slowly queuing up. I know that we've got at least 2, maybe 3.
I think we have 3 or 4.
The tabs, the tables, and the pager, I think, are done. Yeah, I think some of them they end up with a weird visual disconnect between the tables and the pager if they're not done at the same time. Although it is great that they're separate issues. But I don't really have a particular reason for having queued them up. I think it's just that they all came in at once, and I just haven't had a chance to look at all of them. So I think that we'll get them merged in as soon as possible. I think that the ones that we have already are good enough, and we should start with those and then progress.
Okay, that would be great. I think the biggest one is the one that changes the style of the base elements, because that's the one that includes our font change. And I think that if you were waiting for something to happen to be a trigger, getting that pull request ready might be the one. It would be as soon as we change the font, we can change all this other stuff, and then we can start working on is the spacing right around the font? Because I think that without that font change in first, everything else is kind of a little hard to judge. Does the table look right if the fonts in the table aren't right?
Yeah.
Is kind of a good question. So
yeah, that was it. Now that you mention it, because initially we had things like the pager was done and the tabs are done before the font was, and then you can't actually tell what the final look is going to be because the font is different. I didn't know that one came through. I'll take a look at it today.
Okay, I'm not sure there's actually a pull request for it yet, but I know that Ronnie's working on it. So hopefully there will be one soon if there's not already. All right, so other things we're working on, we've got a whole bunch of issues that are tagged with 1.1, if you want to take a look at those in the GitHub queue with our milestone. And then we also have, just other stuff we're always working on. Backdrop is improving user experience. If you find anything that's a funny user experience, you can create an issue and tag it with UX and square brackets in the title. Same thing with developer experience. If you're using it and you find something that feels kind of funny from a developer perspective, put that squared DX in the brackets and we can review those issues kind of on a whole. Those are 2 things that are super important to us, and Drupal has not done a great job at solving those issues in the past, so we're trying to make a little more effort here to make it a little bit easier, especially because our target audience is not the super developer, but the I just want a website kind of developer. So we need to make sure we get those things as cleaned up as possible, especially if we're going to be competing with WordPress in the future. So if you want to create issues and let us know if you find stuff like that, that's good. If you also really care about user experience or developer experience, you can search the queue for those tags and try and find those issues and work on those. That's really good. And anytime those get in, we'll look at what the issue is and try and figure out how soon we can get it in. If it's not necessarily a bug fix, it might go into the next minor version, but those things can be rolling improvements going into Backdrop all the time. So I'm really excited about making everything better. Okay, so after this phone call today, Nate and I have another call with our trademark advisor, which is going to be great. And then after that, we're going to be in IRC sprinting on Backdrop. So if you have some time today, you want to contribute an hour or two, you can meet us in IRC. Everyone is in there talking about different stuff they're working on. If you have any questions, there's usually people in there to answer, which is really good. But we don't have any other in-person sprints scheduled until mid-camp. Oh, wait, that's next weekend, right? Yeah, so mid-camp in Chicago, man, I thought it was like a month away still. So it's next weekend. And we have sponsored the sprint room at the camp. So during the camp, which I think is Friday and Saturday, they've set up aside a sprint/BOF room, which Backdrop was able to give them some money for, which makes us feel warm and fuzzy. And we'll be in there probably all weekend. I don't think Nate or I are giving a talk on Backdrop, but I'm doing a unrelated talk on PHP. So for the rest of the time, we'll be available to hang out in that room and actually work on Backdrop. So if anyone is in the Chicago area and they're curious about Backdrop, or in Andy's case, know a lot about Backdrop already, want to come chat with us, that's definitely a good place to come meet, and we're looking forward to being there. Sunday after the camp, there will be a sprint, and we will be at the sprinting on Backdrop as well. So if you want to go to sessions during Friday, Saturday, come talk to us on Sunday, which will be good. And then we were also invited to, so we have two calendars on Google. One that lists these meetings if you want to follow that, and the other one that lists Backdrop-friendly Drupal events. So if you want to see anything that we have either been invited to attend or any one of you wants to attend and wants added to the calendar, we can definitely drop that on. So far we have MidCamp as the next coming one, and then the Twin Cities Drupal Camp has been added, and that's going to be in the middle of June. So if anyone wants to go to a Backdrop-friendly camp, Twin Cities Drupal Camp is actually one of my favorite Drupal camps. I have a handful of favorites, but this is right up there at the very top. There are a bunch of really great people organizing it. They always have really great content. It's in a beautiful part of the world, and they have the camp at a beautiful time of year. So I definitely recommend Twin Cities Drupal Camp. And if anyone else has any other camps or conferences where they either want to know about Backdrop or want Backdrop people to attend specifically, let us know and we'll throw that onto the Backdrop calendar too. So that's what we've got upcoming. And then related to publicity, we also have the Drupal Watchdog article coming out in May, right around the time of DrupalCon as well. So keep an eye out for that. All right, I know this meeting is running long just because we had such trouble with Google Plus getting it started today. But if anyone has any questions or anything that we should talk about this week, we'll go ahead and open that up for a little while. Sounds pretty quiet.
I've got a question. Well, this is just kind of shout out to Nate. I'm porting Webflow module, and it seems to be going very well so far. I haven't run into any issues, so I expect that by the end of the day. Put you as my maintainer on that.
Awesome. Yes, that's great. I've been swamped.
Yeah, I'll just try to
so I totally appreciate
this stuff out of the way for you.
Awesome.
Jeff also asked if he should take a shot at starting on Path Auto, or if he should wait for someone else to start making smaller issues for him to work on. Jeff, I would love it if you would become the person to start making smaller issues for people to work on. So if you just want to take a stab at, like, how would I put this in core, go ahead and start working on it if you want to. And if you run into an issue where you're like, I don't know how to solve this problem, or I want advice, throw up an issue or ping someone in IRC and we can talk about it. But yeah, we would love you to feel empowered to do whatever you want. And you would probably have at least as good ideas as we would. So let's just talk about it and give it a go. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for volunteering to do that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, for the most part, it really is going to be renaming things just to put it within the Path module namespace, because it's not going to be a separate module. It'll just be part of Path module. So everywhere where we currently have Path Auto, it'll probably just become Path. And if there's like hooks for like hook Path Auto update or something like that, you probably should just be like I'm not really sure what the namespace should be, but maybe it would be path_auto update, so that it's all within path instead of being path auto now. But that's pretty much the biggest problem there, is just putting it into the right namespace.
All right. Well, I guess that's probably a wrap for today, but we will meet again next Thursday. We don't leave for mid-camp until after this meeting, I believe. So have a good week. See you in IRC or on Twitter.
Okay.
All right, bye.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks for joining.